It is August 23, 1942, 9 o'clock in the evening. On the eastern bank of the Volga River, a 12-year-old girl named Sasha is eating dinner with her mother. The windows are open. Somewhere, a radio plays. The summer air smells of dust and sunflowers. Then the sky catches fire. 600 German aircraft arrive over the city in waves, Heinkel bombers, Junkers dive bombers, and they do not stop. They drop incendiaries on wooden neighborhoods. They drop high explosives on oil storage tanks along the river. The Volga itself appears to burn, oil spreading across the surface in sheets of orange and black. By midnight, 40,000 civilians are dead. 40,000. In a single night. Sasha and her mother run. They do not know where. There is no safe direction. The entire horizon is glowing. She will remember the color for the rest of her life. Not red, not orange. Something between the two, a shade she has no name for. The color of a world ending. What happens in the city on this river over the next 162 days will become the largest, bloodiest, most consequential single battle in the history of human warfare. It will kill nearly 2 million people. It will decide the fate of Europe. And it will begin with a girl who cannot look away from a burning sky. Chapter: To understand Stalingrad, you must understand the summer of 1942. It has been 1 year since Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the most ambitious military invasion in history, sending 3 million men eastward into the Soviet Union along a front that stretched 2,000 miles. In those early months, the Germans moved with terrifying speed. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners were taken. Kiev fell. Minsk fell. The Wehrmacht seemed unstoppable, a force of nature dressed in field gray. But before Moscow's gates in December 1941, the advance finally halted. The Soviet Union did not collapse as Hitler had promised it would. It did not shatter like a rotten structure. It bled and kept standing. Hitler responded to this setback the only way he knew how, with a new plan, more audacious than the last. In the spring of 1942, he orders Case Blue, a massive offensive to the south aimed at the oil fields of the Caucasus. Control those fields, and the Soviet war machine runs dry. But to protect the northern flank of this drive, the Germans need to seize or neutralize a city on the Volga River, the city of Stalingrad. Stalingrad is not merely a strategic prize. It bears the name of the Soviet leader himself. Joseph Stalin, the man who collectivized the farms and starved millions, the man who purged his own generals, the man who rules by terror and iron will, this city carries his name. For Hitler, that makes its capture personal. For Stalin, its loss would be unthinkable. Two dictators, two egos the size of continents, are about to aim their armies at the same narrow strip of land. And the men who will do the dying have no say in the matter. On the German side, the force assigned to take Stalingrad is the 6th Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, a meticulous aristocratic officer who rose through staff positions, a man more comfortable with maps than mud. His troops are battle-hardened, their morale high, their supply lines dangerously long. Paulus believes in his orders. He executes them with precision. On the Soviet side, the man who will defend Stalingrad street by street, floor by floor, room by bloody room, is General Vasily Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army. Chuikov is not elegant. He is not polished. He is profane, aggressive, and born of the same working-class soil as the men he commands. He will later say that his goal was simple, to make Stalingrad a place where German soldiers feared to put their feet. He meant it literally. Between these two men and their armies lay a city of 400,000 people, factory workers, teachers, mothers, children, and a river, the Volga, half a mile wide, ice-cold even in summer depths, the only lifeline for supplies and reinforcements from the east. The Volga cannot fall. Stalin makes this explicit in Order Number 227. 3 words become a slogan burned into every Soviet soldier's mind: not one step back. September 13, 1942. The Germans enter the city. They have fought across 500 miles of open steppe for this moment. Their commanders expect to take Stalingrad in days, perhaps a week. The city is already gutted from the August bombing, a wasteland of smashed brick and twisted steel. How hard can it be to capture ruins? The answer comes within hours. Chuikov has understood something that Paulus has not. The rubble is not an obstacle. It is a weapon. Every collapsed building is a fortress. Every crater is a fighting position. Every burned-out factory floor becomes a maze where German tanks, which dominated the open steppe, are now blind, clumsy, and vulnerable. Chuikov orders his men to hug the enemy line so tightly that German artillery cannot fire without killing their own troops. The Germans have a name for what follows: the War of Rats. Room by room, floor by floor, staircase by staircase, men fight with rifles, grenades, knives, and bare hands in spaces so confined that the front line sometimes runs through a single building. Germans on one floor, Soviets on the next. A soldier who survives the morning might not survive the afternoon. Life expectancy for a new Soviet lieutenant arriving in the city averages less than 24 hours. And yet they hold. The Germans capture the central train station on September 14th. The Soviets retake it on the 15th. The Germans take it again on the 16th. Over the next several months, the station changes hands 14 times. 14 times. A building the size of a city block, soaked in the blood of thousands, serves as a measure of how little ground either side can gain. At the center of the battle stands a hill, Mamayev Kurgan, the burial mound of a Tatar warlord, rising 102 meters above the city. From its crest, artillery can command the entire Volga crossing. Whoever holds Mamayev Kurgan holds a knife at the city's throat. It changes hands 9 times. When winter comes, the hill has been shelled so relentlessly that the ground no longer freezes. The constant explosions keep the earth too disturbed, too churned with organic matter to solidify. For months no grass grows on Mamayev Kurgan. Nothing grows. The hill is simply death, reshaped into topography. On September 27th, a sergeant named Yakov Pavlov leads a reconnaissance unit into a 4-story apartment building overlooking a broad open square in the central district of the city. He finds it occupied by a handful of Soviet soldiers, barely defensible, strategically vital. He decides to hold it. What follows is one of the most remarkable stands in military history. For 58 days, Pavlov and his men, never more than 25 soldiers at any one time, a multinational mix of Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians, Kazakhs, hold this single building against repeated German attacks. They dig anti-tank ditches around the perimeter. They cut communication trenches through the courtyard. They mine the approaches. They snipe from the upper floors. They sleep in the basement by turns, a few hours at a time, always waiting for the next assault. The Germans pound the building with artillery, with tank fire, with infantry assault. The building absorbs it all. Its walls crumble, its floors collapse. But Pavlov's men do not leave. Soviet commanders will later observe, with grim dark humor, that more Germans died trying to take Pavlov's house than died during the entire German occupation of Paris. 58 days, one building, a handful of men from half a dozen nations, unified by nothing except the order. Autumn deepens. The city is now a ghost of itself. Not a single building in the contested areas stands intact. The Volga crossing runs under constant German fire. Soviet supply ferries are bombed. Boats sink. Men drown in the icy water 20 meters from the western shore. Into this hell arrives a young man from the Ural Mountains, a hunter since childhood, a man whose grandfather taught him that patience is the most lethal weapon a man can carry. His name is Vasily Zaitsev. He is a sniper. By November, he will have killed over 200 German soldiers. word of Zaitsev reaches Berlin. The Germans send their best counter-sniper, a man identified in Soviet records as Major Erwin König, head of the Berlin Sniper School, to hunt him down. What follows is a cat-and-mouse duel lasting several days through the shattered wreckage of the Red October factory district. Two men lying motionless for hours in the cold, each studying the same scarred landscape, each waiting for the other to reveal himself by the smallest mistake. A movement, a breath of condensation rising in cold air, the glint of a scope. Zaitsev survives. König does not. The duel itself has taken on near mythological proportions in the decades since, details debated, sources questioned. But this much is certain. Vasily Zaitsev is real. His kill count is real. And in the ruins of Stalingrad, the patience of a hunter from the mountains outlasted the training of a soldier from Berlin. While the battle grinds on inside the city, something else is happening. Something that Paulus cannot see, but that will end everything. On the flanks of the German advance, the 6th Army's lines are held not by German troops, but by Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian units. Allied forces less well-equipped, less motivated, and thinly spread across enormous distances of frozen steppe. The Soviet High Command, has noticed this. In secret, over weeks, they have been massing an enormous force, 1 million soldiers, 900 tanks, over 13,000 artillery pieces. The trap is set. The bait is the city that Hitler cannot let go, and that is consuming his best army one floor at a time. On November 19, 1942, at 7:32 in the morning, 1,000 Soviet guns open fire simultaneously. The Romanian Third Army disintegrates in hours. On November 20th, the southern pincer drives north. In 4 days, the two Soviet forces meet at the town of Kalak, 40 miles west of Stalingrad. The circle closes. The 6th Army, 330,000 men, is surrounded. Operation Uranus is complete. November becomes December. December becomes January. Inside the pocket, the temperature drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The men of the 6th Army have no winter equipment. Hitler had promised a short campaign. There was no need for winter coats, for proper boots, for adequate food. That promise, like so many of Hitler's promises, is now measured in frozen corpses. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, assures Hitler that his aircraft can supply the encircled army by air, 500 tons of supplies per day. It is a lie dressed as confidence. The Luftwaffe manages, on average, 90 tons per day. Men receiving a third of what they need to survive begin to starve. In December, a relief force under General Erich von Manstein drives toward the pocket from the south. Operation Winter Storm. For a brief, agonizing moment, hope flickers inside the encirclement. The relief column comes within 40 miles of the pocket's edge. Paulus refuses to break out to meet it, citing Hitler's explicit order to hold in place. The moment passes. The relief force is driven back. The pocket contracts. By January, German soldiers are burning their equipment for warmth. They are eating horses, then dogs, then nothing. In field hospitals, men with untreatable wounds lie in the cold because there is no fuel for heat. Frostbite amputations are performed without anesthetic. On January 31, 1943, Hitler promotes Friedrich Paulus to the rank of Field Marshal, the highest rank in the German military. It is a coded message. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. Hitler expects Paulus to die rather than capitulate. Paulus surrenders the same day. He is found in the basement of a ruined department store, unshaven, ill, visibly broken. He walks past Soviet cameras with the posture of a man who no longer inhabits his own body. On February 2nd, the last German resistance in the northern pocket ceases. It is over. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. The Axis powers suffer approximately 800,000 casualties, killed, wounded, captured. Nearly 100,000 German soldiers march into Soviet captivity. Of those, fewer than 6,000 will ever see Germany again. The rest will die in Soviet prisoner of war camps of disease, cold, and despair over the following years. Soviet losses are, if anything, greater. Approximately 1.1 million military casualties, tens of thousands of civilians killed, an entire city reduced to a field of rubble and bones. But the consequences extend far beyond the casualty lists. Before Stalingrad, Germany advances. After Stalingrad, Germany retreats. The Wehrmacht that marched eastward in 1941 with the certainty of gods is now revealed as mortal, as beatable, as finite. The myth of German invincibility, carefully cultivated for 3 years, used to terrify nations and paralyze resistance, dies in a Soviet basement on January 31, 1943. Across occupied Europe, resistance movements take heart. In Berlin, Joseph Goebbels declares a total war to an audience he can no longer fully deceive. In Washington and London, Allied planners study their maps with new calculations. In Tokyo and Rome, Germany's partners re-examine their alliances with fresh anxiety. The war is not over. 2 more years of slaughter remain. But the hinge has turned. To today, the city is called Volgograd. It was renamed in 1961 when Nikita Khrushchev began dismantling Stalin's cult of personality. The name Stalingrad was erased from maps, from street signs, from official documents. But it could not be erased from memory. On Mamayev Kurgan, where the ground once refused to freeze, there is now a monument. At its summit stands a figure 85 meters tall, a woman, arm outstretched, sword raised toward the sky. The motherland calls. It is one of the largest statues in the world. On windy days, the sword hums. Beneath the hill, in the soil that absorbed so much blood that it ran into the Volga, remain the bones of an estimated 40,000 soldiers, German and Soviet both, whose remains were never fully recovered. Even now, volunteers and archaeologists continue to find them. Dog tags, boot buckles, letters home that were never sent. Vasily Zaitsev survived the battle and the war. He returned to civilian life, worked in a textile factory in Kiev, and seldom spoke about what he had seen. He died in 1991 at the age of 76 and was buried, at his own request, on Mamayev Kurgan, among the soldiers he had fought beside. Friedrich Paulus lived out his days in East Germany, where he gave lectures, wrote his memoirs, and reportedly never spoke about the cold. He died in 1957. Germany was by then divided, rebuilding, attempting to process what it had done and what had been done to it in return. Of the 100,000 German prisoners who entered Soviet captivity in February 1943, the last survivors were repatriated in 1955, 12 years after the surrender. They stepped off trains in West German cities, looking like men from another world. Some had been teenagers when the battle began. Their children, born in their absence, met them as strangers. What does Stalingrad mean across the distance of 80 years? It means that history is not inevitable, that the tide of conquest, no matter how powerful, no matter how certain it seems, can be turned by people who refuse to retreat in a city reduced to rubble across a river they cannot afford to lose. It means that every number in a casualty count is a person, a Sasha who ran from a burning sky, a Yakov Pavlov who held a building for 58 days because no one told him he couldn't, a young German soldier from Bavaria who believed in something and froze to death in a land he had been sent to conquer. It means that cities can be broken and rebuilt, that names can be changed and changed again, that the powerful can be defeated, and that the cost of their defeat is always paid by the ones who have no choice. The Volga flows on. It does not remember what it witnessed. But we do. We must. Nor Visual Notes Production Guide. Open with black screen and audio only. Artillery rumble, building to a roar. before cutting to archival Soviet footage of Stalingrad burning, August 1942. Use slow motion where possible. Avoid title cards until the last moment for maximum emotional impact. Use animated maps, Eastern Front 1941-42, to establish scale and movement. Intercut with German Wehrmacht newsreel footage, available via Bundesarchiv, and Soviet propaganda film clips. Key portrait photographs: Hitler, Wolf's Lair, 1942; Paulus, official Wehrmacht portrait; Chuikov, Soviet wartime photograph. End on civilian photographs of pre-war Stalingrad to remind the viewer what was there before. Primary visual challenge is the city fighting sequences. Rely heavily on Soviet wartime photographer Georgy Zelma's work, available through TASS archives, plus German photography from the early assault period. For Pavlov's house, use the well-known post-war photograph of the ruined building with Dom Pavlova chalked on the wall. For the sniper segment, use photographs of Zaitsev and period weapons. For Operation Uranus, animated maps are essential to convey the encirclement scale and speed. The surrender footage of Paulus, January 31, 1943, is genuine archival footage. Use it. The columns of German prisoners are extensively documented in Soviet film. For the broader consequences segment, use side-by-side maps showing front lines pre- and post-Stalingrad. End with photographs of Soviet veterans at memorials. Commission contemporary drone footage of Volgograd and the Mamayev-Kurgan complex. The Motherland Call statue is visually spectacular at golden hour. Contrast with intimate close-ups, names on memorial walls, flowers on graves, the eternal flame. Close on the Volga itself, moving water as a final image of time and continuity. Period-appropriate Soviet orchestral music, Shostakovich's Symphony No. 7, Leningrad, composed during the Siege of Leningrad, is particularly evocative and in the public domain. German military marches for the early advance sequences. Silence, or near silence, for the most devastating moments. The surrender, the prisoner columns,